This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video I'm going to guide students through the reading of Chapter 9 in Aristotle's work on interpretation. I'll be reading from the tutorial which is posted on the Academy website for students who are subscribed. You can find it using the link on the course page for Chapter 9 of On Interpretation. I think it's lesson 41 in Classical Reasoning 1. At the opening of this tutorial page, I provide a prelection for this lesson because we're starting to gather quite a bit of information in this study, and I wanted to provide a helpful summary of that information. So if you look at the top of the tutorial, you'll read in the prelection, "Thus far, Aristotle has provided us with an introduction to enunciative speech." St. Thomas Aquinas summarizes these teachings in a way that is very helpful for us, which I'd like to share in this prelection. Now, if you look at the commentary of St. Thomas Aquinas on Aristotle's On Interpretation, you'll find that it's actually very long and it's quite a difficult study. I've pulled out of that commentary the most important points, and I think that I make it easy for students to read here and grasp without having to read that lengthy commentary. First of all, Aristotle has taught us that there are 5 divisions of enunciations, 5 divisions of enunciations. These divisions are made with reference to 5 different things. The first is unity, whether an enunciation is one by nature, that it's simple, or that it's one by combination, which is compound. So with reference to unity, we have simple and compound enunciations. Second, with reference to quality, we have affirmative and negative enunciations. Third, with reference to quantity, we have universal enunciations, which are marked by the sign every. We have particular enunciations, which are marked by the sign some. We then have indefinite enunciations and singular when we speak of an individual. So 4 different kinds of enunciations with reference to quantity. Fourthly, we have 3 different kinds of enunciations based on time or with reference to time. Present tense enunciations, past tense enunciations, and future tense. So present, past, and future. And lastly, we haven't talked about this much in this course yet, but there are divisions of enunciations with reference to the matter of the enunciation, and there are 3 different divisions of enunciations based on the matter. Necessary enunciations, these are enunciations that must be. Impossible enunciations, which are enunciations that cannot be. And then lastly, contingent enunciations, which are enunciations that may or may not be true. So necessary enunciations must be true. Impossible enunciations cannot be true. They're never true. And contingent enunciations may or may not be true. So first of all, we learned that there are 5 divisions of enunciations. Second, we learned that every affirmation has a corresponding negation or contradiction. Every affirmation has a corresponding negation. And that in all times or in all tenses, present, past, and future. These opposing enunciations cannot both be true or false at the same time, except for indefinite enunciations. We talked about that back in chapter 7. So we learned that every affirmation has a corresponding negation or contradiction, and that in all tenses, these cannot be both true or both false at the same time. Thirdly, while what we've said above or so far is true of most enunciations, when we speak of contingent future singulars, this is found not to be true. So what is true of other tenses, other enunciations, divided according to time and matter, what's true of them is not necessarily true of contingent future singular enunciations. And we'll look at what this means in just a moment. This is actually the subject of this present lesson. Aristotle is going to point out that there is one kind of enunciation for which these things are not true. What we said about affirmations and negations, that one must be true, one must be false. This is not true of contingent future singular enunciations, and that's the subject of chapter 9. Now, before getting started with Aristotle's text, it's important to understand that contingent things, contingent is the key word in this lesson. Contingent things are things that are neither necessary nor impossible. They are things that may or may not be true. And there are three kinds of contingent things. Three kinds of contingent things. The first are things that happen by chance. So contingent things are things that may or may not be true in the future. They're not necessary things. Necessary things would be things that are that must be true because of the essence of a thing. For example, every man in the future must be rational, must be a rational creature. That's necessary. But there are contingent things which happen by chance. These are infrequent events. They happen by chance or fortune. They can't be expected, definitely not necessary. They happen infrequently. The second kind of contingent events are things that happen by choice. Things that happen by choice are contingent events that are completely neutral, but we choose and act to make them true or not true. They're made true or not true by our choices and actions. And then thirdly, there are contingent things that are contingent by nature. They happen by nature. They normally happen. Normally, but not necessarily. Normally. For example, if a man eats healthily and exercises, he will be healthy. That's a contingent enunciation. It's normally true, but not necessarily true. There can be a man who eats healthily and exercises, and for some reason contracts a disease or has a physical problem. So there are three kinds of contingent events. Contingent events that come about by chance, contingent events that come about by choice, and contingent events that come about naturally, for the most part, normally. It's important for us to understand what contingent events are as we get into this chapter, because as I said, the point of this chapter is to talk about contingent things, future events that are contingent. Okay, so having provided that prelection and sort of warmed up and reviewed what we've studied so far, let's go ahead and get started with Aristotle's text. In the first paragraph, we read the following. In those things, that is, enunciations, in those things which are, in the present tense, and in those things which have come to be in the past tense, it is necessary that affirmation or negation should be true or false. So talking about present and past tense things, it is necessary that affirmation or negation should be true or false. One should be true and the other should be false. In universals, indeed as universals, so in things enunciated about universals in a universal way, always one should be true and the other false. And also in particular things, as we studied in chapter 7. But in universals not universally pronounced, that means in indefinite things, indefinite, this is not necessarily true. And then the last sentence of this first paragraph is really the introduction to this chapter. This, what we've said so far about opposites, this is not necessarily the case, or this is not the case in things singular and future. So when we speak about future events and when we speak about future singular events, this idea that the opposites, one must be true, one must be false, that's not true of singular future enunciations. Okay, and there's a note in the lesson that I added, which reads as follows. This note at the end of the first paragraph introduces the subject of chapter 9, which St. Thomas Aquinas introduces in the form of a dialectical question. He asks, whether in singular enunciations about the future, in contingent matter, it is necessary that one of the opposites be determinately true and the other determinately false. That's the question being investigated here in chapter 9. Whether the singular enunciations about the future, in contingent matter, it is necessary that one of the opposites be determinately true and the other determinately false. It is acceptable for us to accept this teaching by faith, trusting St. Thomas, but Aristotle in this chapter provides the proof. And what I mean by that is there's a conclusion drawn in this chapter. Now we live 2,300 years after Aristotle. We live 1,000 or 1,200 years. If I could do the math here, it's late. St. Thomas lived in the 13th century. We're living in the 21st century, so 800 years. We can accept this teaching by faith. We can simply say, Thomas Aquinas has approved this, Aristotle has approved this, and on those grounds we can accept this, and that would be fine. But in chapter 9 here, Aristotle provides the proof, and we'd like to go ahead and study this proof to understand why Aristotle said this was true and how he proved it to be so. So we can accept the conclusion by faith, but we can also study and understand the proofs for it. So let's get started. Now, this chapter, if you read through, it's quite long, and if you read it quickly, it seems very confusing. But the point of this chapter is actually very simple. Aristotle is simply going to show that if you take the opposite position, which contradicts what he says about future singular enunciations, if you take the opposite position, it simply leads you into absurdity. And that's an indirect way of proving the truth of a statement by proving that its opposite is impossible. So The arguments may seem a little confusing when you read them the first time, but I think once you understand what he's actually doing and saying, it becomes quite simple. Okay? So remember, the point of this lesson is that when we speak about things singular and future contingent matter, it is not necessary that one of the opposites be determinately true and the other determinately false. That's the point. So now let's go ahead and read what Aristotle has to say to prove that this is in fact true. This is paragraph number 2. It starts with for, because Aristotle here is giving his reasons. Because the reason for this is the following. If every affirmation or negation is in fact true or false, it is also necessary that everything should exist or should not exist. And let me explain what that means. If we ask, what does it mean for a statement to be true? If we ask, what does it mean for a statement to be true? It means that the statement, what the statement asserts is true in reality, exists in reality. So what is said agrees with what exists in reality. A lie, if we think about a lie, we say a lie is a statement that contradicts reality. Truth is a statement which agrees with what exists in reality. That's what it means for something to be true. Now that gets weird when we're talking about future events. And this is what Aristotle is touching on here in this lesson. If we're speaking about a future contingent event, and we were to speak two opposite statements, let's say I said something about a future contingent event and someone else contradicted me. According to the normal rules of opposing statements, one of our statements would be true and the other would be false. But if one of them is true, Aristotle says, for one of them to be true, then it must necessarily be so in the future. And therefore, anything that someone says about a future event, if what they say is said to be true, would actually make that event necessary. And Aristotle argues that if this was the case, there would be no such thing as any contingent events or contingent matter, because anything spoken about the future would come to pass by necessity. It's a strange argument, but we can see that this is absurd, Aristotle says, because we know that in our lives, everything does not come about by necessity, but by our counsel and choices and actions. Things either exist or don't exist. And so we know that these things don't come to pass necessarily, but they're contingent. So Aristotle says this idea that a pair of opposites, speaking of future contingent matter, one could be determinately true, would then demand that that event was or came to be of necessity in the future, and there would be no such thing as contingent events. So let's read what Aristotle says here so you can hear that explained. He says, if every affirmation or negation is true or false, every, and he stressed the word every, including future singular enunciations, if every affirmation or negation is true or false, there's no exceptions, then it would also be necessary that everything should exist or should not exist by necessity. For if one person says that something will be, but another says it will not be, it is evident that one of them must necessarily speak truly if every affirmation or negation is true or false. and since both will not subsist at one and the same time in things of this kind. Thus, if it is true to say, this thing is white, or this thing is not white, then it is necessary that it should be white, or should not be white. And if it is white or not white, it was true in the past to affirm or deny that it is white or not white. Also, if it is not, it is falsely said to be so. And if it is falsely said to be so, then it is not. Hence, paragraph 3, it is necessary that either affirmation or negation should be true or false. Nothing, therefore, either is or is generated either fortuitously or casually, nor will it be or not be, but all things are from necessity, and not casually, or in any manner whatever. So let me just reread these the first sentence or two in paragraph 3 here, because I think if we translate the verb differently, it makes it clear what Aristotle is trying to say. Hence, it is necessary that either affirmation or negation should be true or false. Nothing, therefore, either would be or would be generated either fortuitously by fortune or casually by chance, nor will it be or not be, but all things would be from necessity, and not casually or in any manner whatever. For either he who affirms speaks truly, or he who denies, since otherwise it might similarly be generated or not generated. For that which subsists casually or by chance does not more subsist, or will not more subsist in this way than in that. Again, you'll have to read through this several times to really wrap your mind around the details of what Aristotle's saying. But his point is very simple, and if you keep his point in view, it will help you, like a light, to understand what he's saying. He's simply saying, when we say about opposite enunciations that one must be true and the other false, that's fine when we're talking about past events and present events. But when we talk about future events, things get weird. If we say that a person has spoken truly about some future event, then we're saying that it must come to be. And there are contingent future events which don't come about necessarily, even though they could be spoken of in the past. And so Aristotle says, no, if we take this position, which is true of past tense and present tense enunciations, and apply it to future enunciations, it'll lead us into absurdity and conclude that nothing is contingent. So it can't be true. Let's go on to paragraph 4. Again, if a thing is now white, is now, and the focus is on now, if a thing is now white, then it was true to say before that it will be white. So that it was always true to say of anything, which is in generation or becoming to be, it was always true to say that it is or will be. And it is not possible that this is not or will not be. But with respect to that which it is impossible should not pass into existence, it is impossible that it should not be generated. And with respect to that which cannot not be generated, it is necessary that it should be generated. Hence, nothing will be casual, nothing will come about by chance, nor subsist fortuitously or by fortune. For if fortuitously, then it would not be from necessity. Paragraph 5, nor can it be said that neither of them is true, as for instance that it neither will be nor will not be. For in the first place, the affirmation being false, the negation will not be true. Paragraph 6. And besides, if it was true to say that a thing is white, and at the same time great, it is necessary then that both should exist. But if it was true to say it will be tomorrow, then it is necessary that it should be tomorrow. And if it was true to say it neither will be nor will not be tomorrow, it will not be that which may happen casually or in any way, as for instance a naval battle. For it would be requisite that a naval engagement should neither take place nor should take place. Paragraph 7, Aristotle wraps this up. These, therefore, and other such like absurdities will happen if of every affirmation and negation, either in things universal, considered as universal, or in particulars, it is necessary that one of opposites should be true and the other false, namely that nothing in things generated will be casual or by chance, but that all things will be and will be generated from necessity. Hence, it will neither be requisite to consult, to discuss or deliberate anything, because our choices don't matter, because everything is determined by necessity, nor will it be requisite to be busily employed or working diligently, because our actions won't actually cause anything to be or not be, since they'll all be predetermined by necessity. So as that if we do this particular thing, something definite will take place, but if not, it will not take place. Paragraph 8. For nothing hinders but that one person may, for 10,000 years, assert that this will take place, and that another person may assert that it will not, so that from necessity it will come to pass, that it was then true to assert either of them. Paragraph 9. Nor is it of any consequence whether some person should utter a contradiction or should not, for it is evident that the things thus subsist, although the one should not affirm anything, but the other should deny it. For not because a thing is affirmed or denied will it therefore be or not be, nor will it more be or not be for 10,000 years than for any time whatever. Hence, if a thing will subsist in every time, that it will be true to assert the one of these, it was necessary that this should take place, and everything generated will always so subsist as that it will be generated from necessity. For when anyone truly says that it will be, it is not possible that it should not be generated. And with respect to that which is generated, it was always true to say that it will be. Paragraph 10. But these things are impossible, for we see that there is a beginning of things which will be, from our deliberating and acting. So Aristotle says, these things are impossible, that everything should be necessary because people spoke opposite enunciations in the past, one of which must be true. If that's actually true of future contingent statements, then everything is of necessity, but these things are impossible, Aristotle says in paragraph 10. For we can see from our experience that there is a beginning of things which will be that comes from our deliberating and acting. And in short, we see in things which do not always energize that there is a power of similarly being and not being, in which both may happen, namely, to be and not to be, so that also they may be generated and may not be generated. In other words, our deliberation, our actions and choices determine whether they will be or not be. And many things are manifest to us which thus or in this way subsist. Thus, for instance, It is possible that this garment may be cut in pieces, and it may not be cut in pieces, but prior to this it may be worn out. In like manner also, it is possible that this garment may not be cut in pieces, for it would not, prior to this, have been worn out, unless it had been possible that it might not be cut in pieces. The same thing, therefore, must also be said in other generations, which are spoken of according to a power of this kind. Hence, paragraph 11, hence it is evident that all things neither are nor are generated or coming to be from necessity, but that some things have a casual or by chance subsistence, and that affirmation respecting them is not more true than negation, and that there are other things in which one of these subsists more frequently and for the most part, that is, things which occur contingently but naturally. And yet it may happen that one of these may take place, but the other not. Paragraph 12. It is necessary, therefore, that being should be when it is, and that non-being should not be when it is not. It is not, however, necessary either that every being should be, or that non-being should not be. For it is not the same thing for every being to be from necessity when it is, and to be from necessity simply, and the like must be asserted of non-being. There is also the same reasoning in contradiction, for it is necessary that everything should either be or not be, and also that it will be or will not be, but it is not necessary to speak of one of them separately. I say, for instance, it is necessary indeed that there will be or will not be a naval engagement tomorrow. Yet it is not necessary that there should be a naval engagement, nor that there should not be. It is necessary, however, that it should either be or not be. So what Aristotle is saying here, when we're talking about future contingent events, and he gives the example of a naval battle, and I'll stick with that. It is necessary that tomorrow there will be or will not be a naval battle. The either or statement is necessary and true. It is true that there will either be or not be a naval battle tomorrow. So there are two possible options, one affirmation and its negation. The either or, when we're speaking of future contingent events, the either or is necessarily true. It's true that there will either be a naval battle tomorrow or there will not be. But what's not true is that one of them is necessarily true. The either or is true because we're talking about contingent matter that depends on things like human choice or human action or nature or just chance. The either or is necessarily true, but to go further than that and say that one of them necessarily must be true and the other necessarily false is not true about future contingent events. And then lastly, he concludes and wraps up this lesson in paragraph 14. He says, hence, since assertions and things are similarly true, it is evident that in things which so subsist, that in whatever manner they may happen to be, contraries may also happen. It is necessary that contradiction should likewise subsist in a similar manner, which happens to be the case in things which are not always, or which always are not. And that right there, I added a note in the tutorial lesson. When he says things which are always, he's talking about necessary things. When he talks about things which are not always, or which always are not, that means impossible things, things which always are not. Those are two of the different kinds of enunciations according to matter, things which are necessary and things which are impossible. The third category are contingent things. He then says, for of these, that is contingent things, it is necessary that one part of the contradiction should be true or false, not, however, this thing or that, but just as it may happen. It is also necessary that the other part should be more true. Yet it is not necessary that it should now be true or false. Hence it evidently is not necessary that of every affirmation and negation of opposites, the one should be true and the other false, with respect to contingent future statements. For the like does not take place in things which are not indeed, but which either may be or may not be, as in things which are. But it happens as we have said. And that's the end of lesson 9 here. But let's go all the way back to the beginning where I said St. Thomas stated the purpose of this chapter in a question. Whether in singular enunciations about the future in contingent matter, it is necessary that one of the opposites be determinately true and the other determinately false? And the answer to that question is no. It is not necessary that one of the opposites be determinately true and the other determinately false, but that the two options be necessarily true, because both of them may be true or false in the future. And that's not true in the other kinds of enunciation. So remember that lesson 9, or chapter 9, I should say, of On Interpretation is simply asking whether what is true of present tense and past tense enunciations and their opposites, whether that's also true for all tenses, all kinds of enunciations. And the answer is no. It's not true of future tense enunciations that are concerned with contingent matter. That's really the whole purpose here of chapter 9 in On Interpretation. So what I'd like you to do, having listened to this, hopefully that's a helpful guide to at least get you prepared to study this chapter. You're going to need to study it on your own, though, and study every line and hold yourself accountable to read and understand the meaning of every line of the text. That's what mastery really consists of. Read through the passage once, read through the chapter once from beginning to end, just to become familiar with all the content, and then study it carefully, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and make sure you understand and are confident that you understand the meaning of each sentence and each paragraph. There are tutorial notes in the chapter which I think provide just enough help to make it clear without taking too much away from the actual text of Aristotle. And if you have any questions or there's anything that's not clear or that you don't understand, just get in touch. Post it on the course forum on the Study Center, and I'll provide a detailed response to any questions that you post. But I think that's sufficient to help most students understand what the purpose of Chapter 9 is and what's communicated in it by Aristotle. Remember, the answer to the question is very simple to receive by simply accepting it by trust. But if you want to understand the reasons that prove it, then the study of this chapter is important. I hope that's helpful. God bless your studies.